Welcome everybody to Forza Motorsport 7, and today we're taking a look at the 2018 Honda Civic Type R. Now the Type R has been around since 1997, and yeah, this is the 5th generation of the Civic Type R, and it uses the same engine as the previous generation coupled to a 6-speed manual, just like that previous generation. And yeah, this is a lot bigger than that previous generation, as you can see by how large the car is. But there is obviously a benefit to that in terms of a much bigger interior. It's a lot more roomy in the back, for instance, and a lot easier to get in and out of, because the doors on the previous generation at the back were quite small, much larger on this car, and obviously a much larger boot. As you can see, that is not only got a wide entrance but also is quite long and fairly deep as well. So no doubt an incredibly practical car, and with all the additions over the standard vehicle, it's also a lot more set up for sporting, driving or track driving. There are a lot of extras over the standard car, way too many to speak of, but you've got your spoilers, your splitters, your diffusers. Splitter and diffuser are actually made out of carbon fibre, and then you've got your hood scoop, you've got your extra vents. Basically, it's just a lot more of everything over the standard car, including a much more powerful engine as well. It's a 2-litre inline-4 turbocharged engine producing 306 horsepower and 295 pounds-feet of torque, exactly the same power and torque as the previous generation, though obviously because it is a larger car it does weigh 70 pounds more, so a little bit more in the way of weight, but because the engineering is a lot better underneath and it's obviously a newer car, it's actually faster and quicker in not just in terms of speed and acceleration, but also in terms of handling and braking. So yeah, let's get this car out onto the track and see what it can do. So see you when we get there. Right, we're at Suzuka for a couple of laps. We're on the full circuit, so let's see what this hot hatchback can do. Now, I've always been a fan of hot hatchbacks, right back to the 70s, 80s, to modern day versions, and there's clearly been a trend that has been happening of recent, where hot hatchbacks are getting way more powerful. Kind of started with the Ford Focus RS, really, when that got 300 horsepower, and it's just gone. The horsepower rating is quite frankly gone up from there on in, and yeah, Civic Type R has been no different to that. Gradually been getting more and more powerful. I am kind of surprised that they've stuck with the engine from the previous generation, but it is a pretty solid engine. It's got a good amount of revs on it. The turbocharger doesn't overwhelm the noise of the engine, which does sound pretty decent, and it obviously offers a fair decent amount of power and torque. Granted, not as much power as your likes of your Ford Focus RS or your Mercedes A-Class or other vehicles. Can't remember which one other ones have this kind of power, but it's certainly more than your likes of your Astras or your VW Golfs, and it's obviously quite light as well. Despite the fact that it does weigh more than the previous generation, it's not really all that heavy. It's obviously far lighter than the Ford Focus RS or the Mercedes A-Class, which obviously, because they both have all-wheel drive, weigh a hell of a lot more than this. So yeah, it's got lightness on its side, and it's certainly the best handling front-wheel drive vehicle on the game, and probably in real life in general as well, no doubt about that, because yeah, even though it does have a hell of a lot more power than you'd expect a front-wheel drive car to handle, it does, yeah, doesn't really feel like a front-wheel drive vehicle as much as you'd expect. It certainly has some understeer when you really push it, but in general it just hangs in on there and yeah, handles all that power really rather well, especially when you consider how much torque it's got to deal with as well because of that turbocharger. So yeah, handling wise it's really rather good. Braking wise it's solid as well. Thanks to the lightweightness of it, it's able to deal with that amount of power, well, use that amount of power as much as possible. Obviously it's not lugging as much weight as other cars, despite them having more power than this. So yeah, what it's got going underneath is certainly really rather good and highly respectable, and you can back that up quite frankly with the numbers. 0 to 60 in 4.9 seconds, which is 0.6 of a second quicker than the previous generation. 0 to 100 in 11.5 seconds, which is more than 1.3 seconds quicker than the previous generation, and it will do 183 mile an hour, which is 7 mile an hour quicker than the previous generation, which could do 176. So yeah, an incredibly quick front wheel drive vehicle. Certainly rivals other cars that have like all-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive in terms of acceleration times. You're unlikely to find other front-wheel drive vehicles that can do 0 to 60 in less than 5 seconds, while also being as practical as this car is. And being a Honda, it's really not likely going to be an unreliable car either. So there is plenty going for it, and I really do respect it. But there's one big flaw for this in this car as far as I'm concerned, and that's the looks. I really am not a fan of it. It's far too busy, it looks really rather over-designed, and it's just a little bit too ugly as far as I'm concerned. Now the previous generation wasn't a masterpiece by any means, but it at least had clean lines and didn't look too fussy, especially at the rear, whereas this does look really rather fussy with those twin spoilers and massive vents, stick out diffuser. It's not a pretty design, and at the front it just looks like that old Subaru WRX that tried to go into a hot hatchback as well, and just yeah, it's really not something I like the look of. Now obviously that's just my opinion. It's not a fact that this car looks ugly, and I'm sure plenty of other people do like the look of this car, but me personally I'm just really not a fan of it. And the fact in white it looks even worse. Imagine if you have it in black, you disguise some of the unnecessary angles and creases and whatever else, but yeah, it's just not a good look as far as I'm concerned. Now I know hot hatchbacks are supposed to be fun and a bit outrageous and ridiculous in some ways, but there's been outrageous and ridiculous, and then there's been desperate, and this just doesn't look desperate. And yeah, it just looks like it's desperate to stand out from the crowd, quite frankly. And yeah, if you compare it to previous generations of Honda Civics Type Rs, where no, they've not looked amazing, but they've also not looked so radically different to their standard versions that you can tell that they're got all this power underneath. It just looks like it's trying to show off. Whereas I like a Type R or a hot hatchback that's a bit more straight. It's not something that is obviously a quick vehicle, whereas this does look like it's something like that. Now I'm just rambling obviously, but that's just something that's quite irked me, because I really do like what this car's got going underneath. I like its engine, I like its handling, I like its brakes, I like its performance. It doesn't roll about despite having a bit more weight than this previous generation, and in terms of front wheel drive cars in general that are in this class, it's way ahead of them. But the body just, and the looks, and just the overall feeling I get from the way it looks just doesn't do anything for me. So yeah, great performance vehicle, no doubt a great track car as well, and it'll be a practical one as well as being a quick vehicle, so it's got everything that a hot hatchback should be in that regards. But as far as looks goes, which again is just my opinion, but as far as looks goes, it just doesn't do it for me. But I can respect it in every other way, but due to the looks I just can't quite like it as much as I would want to, considering everything else it's got going for it. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.